about every month or so, we spend an hour with Premier Brad Wall. Often it falls at the end of the week on a Friday, where we wrap up some of the day, the week, and the month's issues. If you have questions for the Premier, this is called Ask the Premier, and it's your forum one-on-one with the head of government in Saskatchewan to fire your questions. I come armed, as I do every single time, with, 5, 6, 7 topics or more. I hope we'll get to them all, but it's your opportunity as well at 1-877-332-8255 to put your question to Premier Brad Wall, and you should call that number now because lines are already lighting up and I want you in. To Swift Current, where we find the Premier. Premier nominated last night to be the candidate in your constituency for another election. Contested? Tough win?
It wasn't contested. I think a lot of people were thinking about it, frankly. A lot of local people, maybe, they've had enough, but they were generous, and so it was uncontested. And seriously, it's quite an honor. It's the fifth campaign I'll have represented the Saskatchewan Party in Swift Current constituency, my hometown. So it was a nice evening.
All right, Premier Brad Wall with us. Now, I've got a bunch of questions. I know you've got a few things to cover as well. And, of course, we go at 1-877-332-8255 to the phone, so everybody get ready. Premier, budget week, not a lot of talk on the budget in terms of the specifics, other than the move now to this summary rather than general revenue fund accounting. Why did it take this long to get the summary thing in line?
It's taken this line. Well, first of all, you're right. It has taken a long time. I remember in opposition, we would encourage the NDP government of the day to at least report on both, report on the general revenue fund, report on the summaries. They made that move, and we were continuing with that move. So it's not as though the government of Saskatchewan has not been reporting summaries, which is just the overall picture of all of government. We would do that twice a year, at the mid-year and then at the when the budget was presented. So I think this, though, is the natural evolution. The auditor recently has said, look, you need to just make summaries the focus of your budget presentation, and we've made that move now. It's fairly historic. Obviously, the first time in Saskatchewan we've gone to this sort of a presentation. I would just point this out, though, because it includes everything. That includes the auto fund. That includes pension funds, crop insurance. There could be a situation where, there's something that happens with respect to weather that impacts the auto fund and crops. Where the government's actual operational budget hasn't changed, where we are still not spending more than we're taking in, and it could show a deficit. I think perhaps that's why governments have been a bit reticent to do it, because, I think for most people, a deficit means a government is spending more than they're taking in to operate the government. That's what I believe, and I do think most people believe that. But in a summary, you can just have an interest rate change, and it'll impact a surplus or a deficit, regardless of how well the government's managing the fund. But we'll be able to also report on what's called the operational plan to Saskatchewan people, so they will know, as is the case in this budget, that indeed there is a surplus there as well.
Premier Brad Wall with us. Okay, as I go down the list, checklist here, Alison Redford, the Alberta Premier, effectively leaves office before she's pushed, only became the Premier in late 2011, then that contested election in April 2012. Now she's gone. What did you think of that?
Well, I was shocked. If you're interested in politics, you're following that story. But I thought after last weekend there would be now some stability there, that they had taken some decisions as a governing party, and I wasn't expecting this announcement. So I have not yet talked to Alison yet. I will do that. We've reached out just to offer our best on a personal basis, but we've worked on some projects together. Keystone is one of them. Of course, the U.S. partnership. We just met via telephone last week with Alberta and British Columbia. That's the elements of the U.S. partnership, and I think made some progress in terms of smoothing out recognition for apprenticeship training in all three provinces, regardless of where you are, and making the mobility question easier, improving the trade deal. So, whatever happens with leadership in any of those three provinces, I'm hopeful we can continue to make progress on the U.S. partnership for Western Canada. Now,
will it make a difference? I mean, like her successor, and we don't know who that will be, would it be likely that given the party, again, it's governed Alberta since 1971, given Alberta politics, that there would be any impact negatively on the New West Partnership or on shared issues?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think probably the only parties in Alberta that would be opposed to that regional agreement would be maybe the NDP. I'm not even sure about that. And maybe in one of the other opposition parties. But it shouldn't make a difference. I think it's important for us as at the Premier's table, so to speak, of that new partnership to provide leadership, to be pushing each other. We should be pushing each other in terms of making it easier to do business in Western Canada without worrying about those borders. And I'm confident that'll continue to be the case.
Premier Brad Wall with us. Okay, current political issues, two of them looming fairly large, one stemming from the budget, the other the Lean Initiative. Now, this is something that your government brought into health care, getting a lot of heat in the legislature. Mr. Broughton says his inbox is brimming, his telephone's been ringing off the wall. The Union of Nurses now pulls out of their support for Lean. Are you in trouble on this issue as spending too much money for this management consulting style?
No, because I think we've been able to demonstrate we've already saved more money in the healthcare system than the entire cost of the contract. That's point number one. And Lean's not just about saving money. So we've also been able to demonstrate improvements in patient-centered care. For example, because we're listening to frontline staff and leaning out in some of the regions how we do addictions appointments, we've taken the cancellation of those appointments down to zero. We've also been able to close the gap between diagnostics and actual care as a result of leaning out the system. We've saved $36 million in just managing the blood inventory alone better through Lean. So, I think that these examples are well known in the system. And we're going to continue with this. We're not the only place doing it. Manitoba's moving in this direction, following our lead. Many institutions across North America have hired the same consultant because they happen to be the best. It's a short-term project, and we'll have our capacity to continue on with it long after the contract's over.
There's a lot of talk from Mr. Broughton about the Japanese aspect of this. Is he overplaying the Japanese angle?
Well, I'll leave that for people to decide, but it's a little strange. It seems like he's more concerned that there are Japanese words involved here, and I think there's, maybe a dozen. This is a Japanese innovation, started at Toyota, expanded to the private and public sector around the world. And so there's some terminology. And we've had, by the way, Lean implemented in certain places like Wascano Rehab where they've just customized it. They just wanted to anglicize it, and so they don't use the terms. But he's really hanging a lot on this, and I'm more interested in results. I don't care the kinds of words they would use. I think we all should be interested in results. So, that's probably a question to be put to him.
Premier Brad Wall with us. This is our March edition. Call it March Madness. Ask the Premier. All right, lines are lighting up. It's 1-877-332-8255. Stand by. When we return, we get into your calls here on News Talk Radio.
You're listening.
I'm John Gormley. Premier Brad Wallace here. This is the March edition of Ask the Premier. Questions coming up, everything from provincial parks to healthcare to the Lean program to potash drilling and more. So lots of stuff on the lineup today. You have a question for the Premier? It's 1-877-332-8255. Premier, on this Lean initiative, letter in the Leader Post today from a nurse who's a Lean consultant, and she calls out the Union of Nurses and says their opposition to Lean is ideological and it's more based on union politics than anything else. The trying to plumb public opinion. I mean, the chattering classes are talking Lean. Mr. Broughton says his inbox is full of messages from, one assumes, healthcare employees who want to remain anonymous. Do you have any way of knowing how this is playing with the actual people who are dealing with Lean in healthcare? Well,
I can tell you this. In terms of emails and social media interventions I'm seeing a lot of support for Lean. I'm hearing it more than anecdotally. By the way, the Sun Union president that this week came out questioning Lean just 8 weeks ago was gushing about how it can transform the system. And then when challenged on that, the consistency of 8 weeks ago and new comments, I think it was on another radio station just yesterday, she even indicated that she sees a lot of benefit to Lean. But I want to hear from people. This is about a frontline worker-driven process. We need to be listening to healthcare professionals to improve efficiencies in the system and improve care. That really is what Lean is all about. We're going to, make this investment to build that right into the system in the long term. So I've been saying to Mr. Broughton, if his inbox is full, he's saying that these people don't want their names to be known to the government. They ought not to worry about that. But if they are, fair enough. We're asking him, just redact out their names. Provide us the emails. Provide us all of these interventions so that input can come to the government. We want to hear good and bad, and he just hasn't done that yet. I hope he does. I hope he provides this input to the government because we're earnest and sincere about wanting to make sure it's driven by the front line and that it's working.
So you are calling him out then to present the emails?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know why he wouldn't. I've indicated that yesterday in the legislature. So is the Minister of Health. He has been saying, well, all the people in his full inbox they don't want their names released. Fair enough. They ought not to be concerned because we would take their input earnestly and respectfully. But if they are, just, redact the names and table the letters, send them over so they can be part of our ongoing review to make sure that Lean is achieving all its objectives.
This is Premier Brad Walls. Ask the Premier. Let's go to the phones now. Oren in Saskatoon, thank you for your patience. You have a question to the Premier on provincial parks.
Yeah, thanks, John and Mr. Premier, for taking my call. I was just wondering, Saskatchewan provincial parks are, they have an all-time high attendance, and I know there's a new park opening this year, and I think there's plans for another one, but in the future, is there any plans for any new parks or even just expansion of sites and services for existing ones?
The answer is yes on the latter point. There's not immediate plans to identify another new park potentially, but I can tell you that our government, since we were elected, have electrified another 1,000 sites. We have significantly increased investments in the parks in terms of modernizing the facilities, but also expanding them. And I can think of the parks that we go to where we camp, as we camp every summer, and we really enjoy the provincial parks. There is a lot of, they are very busy. We obviously found that out again, unfortunately, so with the reservist site system that did not perform as it should. Part of the reason it didn't perform as it should is the demand, not just from our campers, but from especially neighboring Alberta. So, by the way, on that point, I've heard from people who've said maybe Saskatchewan people ought to have the first crack on that reservist site system, and as we seek to make sure this doesn't happen again, that's very much in consideration.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about, though, the whole software thing? This Camus company's let you down twice. So how much do you start to say there might be an issue here with the software?
Well, that's precisely what we're concerned about, and I think the minister is taking a pretty hard line with the support of the government, by the way, and again the cabinet taking a real hard line with the providers here, because this is year 3. Last year was a little better, and this year was, of course, not good. So it just has to work. People are planning. I mean, I know what it's like. We know what it's like. You kind of know when your holiday might be, that week you're going to get. You want to make sure you get a site, and hopefully you get maybe one of the 3 or 4 or 5 preferred sites that you have made note of last summer. And then the thing crashes, or your card gets double booked or triple billed, and it's frustrating. So we just have to fix this. We have been making parks a priority since 2007, since we were elected. We've made historic investments in them to expand them, and now we've got to make it so that people can get the sites that they want, within reason, again, because there's so much demand, but the system has to work better than it does.
Back to the calls. Healthcare question. Scott in Swift Current, you're on with Premier Brad Walser.
Hi, Premier. I'd just like to thank you for such a great night last night, but to go with my medical question, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I have a pump, and it's very expensive to buy and get supplies for. Is there any consideration to cover that under the Saskatchewan Health Plan?
Yeah, Scott, thanks very much. Scott attended the nominating meeting last night, John, so we had a brief chat about it. our government has moved to cover insulin pumps for type 1 diabetics up to the age of 25, and for Scott, that's not he's older than that. So we have been listening to people on this front. We have moved to cover costs for just the pump and other associated costs in terms of diabetes. We campaigned on that last time, kept that promise, and the short answer is yes. We're going to look at potential improvements down the road. Again, we do these, we look at improvements, things that we would like to do, but also in the context of making sure that, the budget remains balanced going forward. But the short answer is yes, there would be consideration for that sort of thing.
This is Ask the Premier. Premier, we've been following every week the situation of this family who are trying to get the little adopted guy back from Pakistan, the Afridi family. Every week we push the federal government. The province is under pressure to sign this letter of no objection. And, we get that there are all sorts of legal requirements and some treaties. But, this has become a gridlock here where you've got two levels of government, each saying, the other should move. Is it possible for your government to do anything to get that little 3-year-old boy and his mum back?
June Droughty, the minister, and I, we talk about this often. This is so very frustrating for all the reasons that you have mentioned, and frankly, your listeners have mentioned when they call in on that regular segment. Our officials are just saying to us that we absolutely need to see the permanent severing of parental ties before that letter of no objection can happen. That still wouldn't be the final step, by the way. The federal government needs to do what they need to do. But I've just said to June, and she knows this, the minister, that whatever we need to do, whatever we can control, we must do, and that's where we're at, John. My understanding is everything the provincial government can do has been done, and we do need those representing the family in this case to help us on that verification of severing of parental ties. That's my understanding. But it's something that we talk about often, and it is just extraordinarily frustrating that we're in this bit of a gridlock. I think that's the appropriate way to put it. We just have to be sure as a provincial government that there is nothing else we can possibly do to expedite this very compelling adoption.
1-877-332-8255. Okay, we're going to head to the bottom of the hour, news update in a second. If we have time, you want to ban Russian vodka as a display of solidarity for Ukraine?
Well, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Because you know that...
Oh, do you want to talk about it right now?
You know that Russian Prince is made in Brampton. Prince Igor is made in the Niagara Falls.
Yeah, there's only one bottle. There's only one bottle that one product that would be affected here.
Russian Standard.
Correct.
And to think...
You know your vodka, sir.
It's all research. When we get back, who knew? I always thought Smirnoff was Russian. It's British. This is News Talk Radio. I'm John Gormley. This is Ask the Premier March edition. Looking down on the screen, coming up, we're going to call on Potash Drill. Where's he? Okay. Is that guy gone? Okay, well, he's left us. Ron will have a question on the lean program, and there will be more. Hey, and there's now room for you at 1-877-332-8255. Your questions to Premier Brad Wall on all things Saskatchewan. Okay, just as we headed off into the news update, you figured out that there's really only one truly Russian brand of vodka. So is it up to a province to say you're going to boycott or delist a Russian product as a form of protest against the events in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, the background here, John, is yesterday after question period, I got a question from our media. We typically meet in a scrum, and our media were aware, I think, that Manitoba was contemplating something with Russian liquor products, delisting them there. So I was asked, were we considering it? And I said, yeah, well, we had certainly asked the question, what do we sell in our stores? And it's something under consideration. I also did say, though, there that, obviously we strongly support the people of Ukraine and oppose the aggression that's happened in Russia, but we're not the national government, and our responsibility does not extend to foreign policy or trade sanctions. And so, we were looking at this, but we were going to check with the federal government and make sure that we weren't freelancing, that we're consistent, and we'll probably have something more formal to announce next week. We may simply just want to say, look, here's the product, and people can make their own decision. Maybe they want to do a boycott. We're going to try to identify, by the way, if there's any Ukrainian made vodka that we sell, and maybe people will want to support the cause that way to the extent they buy any vodka at all.
Premier Brad Walls here. Ask the Premier any of your questions. 1-877-332-8255. Now, Premier, we often do a takeaway, take-back arrangement where you get a question on something that you say you will be back on the next edition. Anything from the last time you were here?
Bob called in. He reported a break of a water line in the city of Saskatoon last June, I believe it was. And he noted that the province, he thought, had made legislative changes in 2007 which changed the liability to cities to cover such damages. There have been adjustments. It's true. There was amendments we passed in 2007 which would have expanded municipal government's liability protection. And so then it does limit the municipality's liability, except if the damage was due to municipal negligence. So if Bob is listening, there are municipal advisors within the Government Relations Ministry, which is easy to find, I think, online. And if he wants to contact those folks, we can determine where his case is in the spectrum of negligence.
1-877-332-8255. Alan in Welwyn, you're on with Premier Brad Wall on a potash drilling question, sir.
Yes, good morning. Thanks, John. And Mr. Wall, good morning. I'd like to point out at first, this is not an harassment call. I'm very much on the side of the Sask Party and Mr. Wall. So I'm phoning because we've been dealing with the Sask Party for 6 or 7 years. We're trying to get a settlement down here for about 190 of us. We've had our property rights stolen from us back in '95 by the NDP and PCS, taking away our mineral rights in this area on about 177 quarter sections of land.
Now, this is the potash. This is the potash restricted drilling area where there are mines underneath, and there are issues that the drilling isn't allowed above them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to point out a few things before I ask Mr. Wall to answer this, because we've been trying to meet with somebody official there for 6 or 7 years. We've had so many different people talk to us. We were encouraged to sue the government, which we did, and then we withdrew that. Wasn't working for us, and their lawyer we had was asking for us to go forward. Then we told the government we just wanted to discuss. Then we were told by the government that we can't meet with them and talk because it's before the court. Now I've talked to 2 or 3 of the biggest lawyers in Saskatchewan, and John, you will verify this. You can meet. You're encouraged to have dialogue if you're in a court case, so it doesn't go before the courts. So this statement by the government that we can't meet us before the court is wrong.
Okay, Alan, I need you to get to a question, sir.
Okay, the second thing was we were told that we can't drill down here because it's restricted drilling zone. It's safety of the mine. We don't want to drill. We just want compensated for the land the property that was been stolen from us. So I'd like an answer on that without using those 2 answers which are wrong.
Well, I appreciate the call, and I also appreciate the persistence. I understand the frustration too, because we raised this issue in opposition. Now, and my advice is, though, right from the Attorney General, this question was asked from the floor of the SARM convention, and so I asked the Attorney General afterwards, and his counsel to me was that no, the meetings are difficult to do because of the fact that the suit's not been withdrawn. I think that's my understanding, but it is worth another discussion. I appreciate the call, and I will have that discussion, and we will report back next time.
All right. Your chance to put your question to the Premier, 1-877-332-8255. On the lean program, Ron in Lestock, you're on with Premier Wall.
I noticed that lean doesn't seem to be looking at management levels. So is there any chance of having a bloat program once you're done with the lean to trim back management, say in the Medicare system, and then extend it to SaskTel, Sask Power? All the government outfits seem to have multiple levels of management that's heavy, top heavy.
Thanks very much for the call. I'm not sure if your listeners are aware, John, we haven't made a lot of this, although you've mentioned it. We're now up to about 2,000 fewer full-time equivalents in government, and many of those would be the middle management positions that we have reduced. We have eliminated, actually, right across government. In healthcare, with respect to management and just long-term efficiencies, quite separate from the lean that's already paid for itself and is finding better opportunities for patient care improvements. Quite separate from that, we have now in the last 2 budgets, including this most recent balanced budget, we have asked those health regions specifically for efficiencies. We've said, here's an increase in your overall budget greater than inflation, but we expect this level of efficiencies to be found. And last year they found those, whether it was looking at the complement of management to frontline or other efficiencies. So this is a top priority for us, and it's going to be a top priority. And by the way, lean is about more than the health system. We have, without need of additional contract expenditures, but based on what we've learned from this one, we've leaned out in oil and gas the regulatory structure. The industry tells us we're saving millions of dollars that would be lost to the economy in delays in terms of permanent improvements, because we have improved that efficiency. So this is going to be a long-term effort on the part of the government to get more efficient. You know, we're not spending our money, we're spending the people's money, and we want to make sure we're as efficient as possible with it. Premier
Brad Wall here. This is Ask the Premier, where your questions take center stage. The number is 1-877-332-8255. Mubarak in Saskatoon, you're on with Premier Brad Wall.
Good morning, sir, Mr. Premier and John Gormley. Thanks for taking my call. Mr. Premier, first of all, I'm compelled to acknowledge the great job that you're doing for the people of Saskatchewan. May God bless you and guide you every step of the way. Thank you for that. The question is in regards to the family reunification program that was initiated federally and also provincially a few years back, under which people could come here and live for about a year, and then you could sponsor your loved ones from other countries. And that program brought lots of immigrants from across Canada, other major centers, to Saskatchewan. And more than anybody else, I'm sure you're aware that the participation the immigrants are, taking part in the growth, this tremendous growth that Saskatchewan is going through. But when this program was ended, lots of people, quite a few people left Saskatchewan. And some more are in the pipeline to leave. I was just curious if the government of Saskatchewan is doing something with the federal government to restart that program again.
Thanks for the call, Mubarak, and the question you've raised. This was a concern for us when the federal government was requiring provinces to make this change. In terms of the family class, we were pointing out to the government that we had one of the best settlement records in the country. In fact, better than the federal government's settlement record. They have a federal stream of immigrants, and then there's provincial streams. What we were able to do is work hard with the federal government, negotiate the provision for some. The family class terminology is gone, but certainly if there is a job waiting and available, we've I think built in some flexibility that addresses the needs for families to want to be together and reunited. It's not as it was before, that is true, but we think it is an improvement over what might have been, and it does tie the new immigrant to a job that exists so that there's obviously an available employment right away. We're always working, though, to Mubarak's question, we are always in discussion with the federal government to make sure that a growing economy in Saskatchewan is treated perhaps uniquely within the federal system. And, to be also fair to the federal government, we've looked at our share in Saskatchewan of increases to the nominees and the number of immigrants that we can settle here. And Minister Kenney, previous to the current minister, who was Minister Alexander, has approved significant increases in our cap, far and above our sort of percentage of the population, recognizing that our province is growing. So there's good things, and there's things that we have to work out still. But I appreciate the call, Mubarak.
Premier Brad Wall is here, and so are you. More questions next. I'm John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio. I'm John Gormley. Premier Brad Wall is here. This is our March edition of Ask the Premier. Okay, interestingly, 2 calls on lean, the new healthcare management style. One concerned, one favorable. Jim in Saskatoon, you're on with Premier Wall on lean.
Yes, I'd like to make comments about the lean program. Our company has been involved in it for about 4 years, and it has made tenfold improvements. It affects everybody from I'm a forklift driver for our company, right up to management. It has directly affected what we get is called a profit sharing check, and it's done great for everybody and everything in our company.
Well, good to hear.
There's an application for lean. Of course, it was innovated in the private sector by Toyota, and so there's an application both in the public system like healthcare, and there's a hospital called the Virginia Mason Hospital in Seattle, one of the best. Actually, they've been voted, I think, hospital of the decade. They've spent the same amount of money with the same contractor, actually, with John Black and Associates. and have just, frankly got these awards and ratings in terms of care. Just after the budget, I had a friend of mine who's got an auto body shop, a successful one in Regina, who was going to be meeting this week, ironically enough, with a consultant to look at leaning out his business for the reasons that Jim has mentioned. So we're going to go ahead with it. It's about efficiency, sure. And we've paid for the cost of the contract with those savings, but it's also about a better patient care experience and engaging the front line. So we're going to carry forward with it.
Walt, you have some concerns, sir, on the cost of the consulting.
Am I on?
You are, Walt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in favor of lean by going more direct to nurses and our practicing physicians. My question is, I want to know who examined the resume of Mr. Black and his U.S. consulting company when he was engaged to do our lean. He was a general in the Army that got medals for bombing civilians in Vietnam with Agent Orange. Then he engaged in improving the productivity of a big airline company in Seattle.
Yeah, the company John Black and Associates, we certainly did check them out because we wanted to make sure they had a proven record in healthcare. And there is a long list. I've just mentioned one of them of hospitals that serve huge cities with populations greater than our entire province, or who are located in those cities, certainly.
Well, let me jump in here. I see this surprises me because one of the things that I was actually concerned about on the lean criticisms was, quote, no one's ever done this on healthcare to this scale. I mean, I was hearing that on social media and from a number of New Democrats last week.
Well, they're just wrong. He's worked with a number of hospitals. The company has, and I mentioned the Virginia Mason Hospital as one. There's a number. I don't have the list in front of me. But there's a number of different hospitals he's worked at, large organizations where they brought in John Black and Associates to lean out the system, to make sure they're providing more efficient care, that they're listening to the front line, that the patient care experience improves. So this is the one we went with. And again, I'm happy to say it's a 4-year contract, $40 million, so 0.2% of the health budget over those 4 years. It'll be done because we'll have the capacity to do our own lean training then right across government, not just in health. And it's already saved more than the total contract cost, and we're only about 2 years in. So, and the patient care piece is the most important. We're going to carry on with it. It's why, by the way, my inbox is not full. There's concerns that come in, but there is also a lot of people, significantly frontline workers, saying this is good, and we need to continue with this kind of lean initiative. Okay,
time for one more call quickly. Ken in Estevan, you have a question on Sask Power for Premier Wall.
Yes, Mr. Wall. Sask Power has a bunch of outlying land around here that they don't use, and I've inquired twice now on how we could go about getting access to it, to buy it, to develop it, and they seem to just not want to say too much. My other question is, Rafferty Dam here, back when Grant Devine was in, he was going to develop Rafferty into cottages and stuff, and nobody since then wants to touch that, and that would be quite a growth area down here because we have Rafferty and Alameda dams that are sitting with really nothing on and nobody using it. I wonder why your government won't allow this to move forward.
I wonder why we won't as well, Ken. That's a great call. We, of course, have a program in place where we're trying to move out of the land ownership business. Had a program, some incentives even for farmers who wanted to buy Crown lease land. But we're also wanting to promote development in terms of recreational development where there's some Crown land that's not maybe perhaps environmentally sensitive. So I would like to, if Ken would call into perhaps his MLA's office, perhaps Green Eagle's office, or mine, and highlight the specific areas, and I will find out from Sask Power why we wouldn't want to look at this option.
Mr. Premier, good having you here. Thank you, and shall we do this again in a month?
Sounds good to me, John. Thanks.
Premier Brad Wall on Ask the Premier.